Hey everybody, welcome. So today we're going to be talking about what happened on the January LSAT. Thousands of people walked into the LSAT expecting one test, but they got a different one. Not because the questions were harder, not because the passages were unreadable, but because they were told to expect something that ended up not being there. And that single moment of surprise, that split second of wait, what? It cost people real points. Let me explain what changed and why it mattered more than most people realize, and how this kind of silent LSAT change is now part of the test itself. Imagine that you sit down, you open reading comprehension, and you do what every serious test taker does. You do a quick structural scan of the four passages. And then you notice something missing. There's no passage A, there's no passage B, no comparative set, no paired reading, just four single passages. When that happens, your brain doesn't calmly ask, what's the author's main point? Instead, it asks something far more dangerous. Is the LSAT broken? Did I miss something? Did LSAC screw up? And that moment of panic doesn't feel dramatic, but it can be lethal on a timed exam like the LSAT, because the LSAT is no longer testing reading, it's testing how you respond when your expectations collapse under pressure. Now, for nearly 20 years now, LSAC's own materials explicitly stated that every reading comprehension section includes a comparative passage. Every single section, this was official LSAC language. But then, quietly, after the fact, after they made the change, they changed it on their website without any announcement or warning or any email. There was no heads up. And of course, no one's obsessively checking or refreshing some random blog post on LSAC's site before the test, and nor should they have been. So people walked in with these expectations that LSAC itself had reinforced ever since comparative passages were introduced back in June 2007. And when the reality didn't match your expectations, that disconnect cost people time, it cost them confidence, and it cost them points. Now, the irony is that this doesn't hurt beginners the most because they don't even know the format. It doesn't hurt elite scorers the most because they can adapt. It hits those in the middle the hardest because serious students rely on procedural comfort. They've trained that pattern recognition, they've internalized the timing of the exam, and they expect this section to look a particular way. And so when the structure changes without any warning, your brain stalls, things fall apart. Not because you're weak or you're a bad test taker, because the script you've rehearsed no longer matches your reality. Two students with the same reading ability can walk out with dramatically different scores based purely on how fast they can let go of the plan when things change. Because when something unexpected happens on the LSAT, there are two versions of the same test taker. One of them asks, did I skip something? Is there another screen? Should I ask the proctor if something's wrong? And the other says, okay, this is what it is. And they just start reading. They go into go mode. And every second that you spend hesitating is a second that you're not earning points. And the LSAT doesn't care why you hesitated. It only cares that you did. Now, here's the rule, and it's simpler than most people think. If the section loads cleanly, the test is good. There's no mistake. That's it. You do one fast structural scan, you confirm what's there, and you deal with it. And you stop searching for what is not coming. You're not there to verify the test format, you're there to take the test that they give you. And your job in reading comp never really changes. You're always answering the same questions. What's the author doing? How is the passage organized? Which viewpoints matter? Where does the author stand? Whether it's a single passage or a comparative, your core task is the same. Now, when something unexpected shows up, as it may, you want to avoid these four traps. First, you don't reread the instructions. If something were wrong, rereading wouldn't fix it, it would just waste your time. Second, don't search for missing screens. There is not some other passage loading behind the scenes. Third, don't mentally argue with the test. Thinking this isn't fair is useless when the clock is ticking. And fourth, don't try to confirm anything. Confirmation is a luxury that you just do not have on the LSAT. Every second you spend doubting the setup is a second that you're not earning points. Now, here's the twist. For many students, 4 single reading comp passages are actually easier. The comparative ones are slower. There are more viewpoints to navigate, more mental overhead. And strong readers often lose time just getting oriented. So if you didn't sabotage yourself with self-doubt, this new version of reading comp may have helped you. Because even in single passages, you're still doing a kind of comparative reasoning. You're looking at competing explanations, shifts over time, academic debates, and that skill didn't disappear. They're still testing it, only the format changed slightly. And this is not some unique one-time change, it's a pattern. If we zoom out big picture over the past several years, the LSAT went from being on paper to being online. They removed logic games, and the format has shifted multiple times since. And each time it changes, people feel blindsided, and that's normal. But the underlying test has not changed. The modern LSAT increasingly rewards adaptability under uncertainty. High scorers aren't the people who get the test they planned for, they're the people who handle the test that they're given. Now, uncertainty is no longer a bug, it's a feature, it's part of the exam now. And this is not accidental in a way because in law school, they cold call you. It doesn't follow your outline, it's not pre-planned. The exam fact patterns don't match your study guide. Professors will introduce twists on purpose. And strong students don't freeze under pressure, they adjust. And the LSAT is doing the same thing now. They're not testing whether you can execute a perfect plan, but whether you can let go of the plan when reality refuses to cooperate. The case you get is the case you argue. Now, we don't have an official explanation for why LSAC quietly removed the dual or comparative passages for some test takers in January without any warning, but we can look at LSAC's incentives. Those always matter. And one possibility is that LSAC is looking to quietly reduce score inflation without actually making the test content harder. The new LSAT going forward, whether you're taking it this week or in April or June or beyond, it's going to have the same content, same scoring, but perhaps a bit more uncertainty with regard to the format. And that alone is going to pull scores toward the middle. Another possibility is test security. There have been organized cheating rings on the LSAT over the past several years, ever since the LSAT went online. And so when a test is too predictable, it becomes easier to game. And LSAC has been reusing multiple LSAT exams. And so some of those leaked exams, of course, make it easier for students to get higher scores. And so changing the structure without advance notice makes that leaked material less useful without actually adding harder questions, just making it more unpredictable, which hurts the cheaters more than anybody else. And either way, of course, the result is the same. Your ability to be flexible matters more than the format that you're dealing with. So here is the mindset shift that will ultimately protect your score no matter what changes. Nothing is missing, nothing is broken, and this might actually be an opportunity because while other test takers are burning time second guessing, you're already reading and solving questions. And that's how these LSAT format changes will stop costing you so many points and start becoming an edge for you. Because the LSAT you're taking now is not testing whether you memorize the structure, it's testing whether you can perform calmly when the structure changes without asking for permission. And that skill is going to carry forward with you into law school and beyond. Now, I see several questions coming into the chat here. Thank you for putting those in there. I will get to as many of those as I can. And if you're looking for more support beyond what I can do in this live format here, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring lessons for everybody watching this now or later. The link to book that free tutoring with me is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below this video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and Instagram as well. Open offer for all of you watching this now or later. Happy to meet with you personally, privately over Zoom video, help you talk through your plan of attack, help you reach your goal score on your time frame, whether you're taking it in April or June or August or beyond, whatever score increase you're looking for, I'll do what I can to help you get there. I see a lot of questions coming into the chat here, some serious, some less serious. I'll try to answer the ones I can most usefully answer to help you better improve your LSAT score. So I see here that Duncan says, I'm taking the LSAT on Friday. Good luck, Duncan. I hope that you rock it. That's 2 days from now. And so my best advice would be relax, take it easy. Don't burn the candle at both ends. Don't take a practice test every single day. It's a recipe for burnout. In the final couple of days, you want to go in fresh, feeling cool, feeling confident, ready to crush it. Maybe you take one last practice test today, review it later today, but the day before the exam, you want to just relax, take it easy, take a hot bath, get a massage, go for a walk, weather permitting. Hopefully, it's a little bit warmer now than it has been wherever you are. I know it's been pretty cold lately. Hope you haven't been suffering too bad, but now that it's a bit nicer out, hopefully, take advantage of the warmer weather and get outside for a little bit. Do whatever you can to de stress. Then you get all your materials ready, your government issued photo ID, get your snacks ready, water bottle ready, number 2 pencils sharpened, so that you're ready to go the second that you wake up on Friday, whenever time you're taking the test. Fahad asks recommendations for applying in this cycle. So if you mean the cycle finishing up now, ideally you want to have your application materials ready to go, your personal statement, your any other essays, your resume, your letters of rec, so that whenever your score comes back, if it hasn't come back already, you can just hit submit. And so maybe you're taking the LSAT in February, scores come back February 25th. You have about 3 weeks between taking the LSAT and getting your score. And so during those 3 weeks, you get all your ducks in a row, so you can hit submit. The second application, their scores come back. You technically can take the LSAT in April for this cycle. It's a little bit later than I'd recommend for most folks, but if you were totally committed to doing that, you technically could still do that. Some schools will take the results of the April LSAT, some won't, but you really do want to have your applications ready so that you can apply the second that the score comes back. I see Sydney's asking, should I take my practice tests with or without experimental sections? So I always recommend taking your practice tests with the extra unscored experimental section, because you want to simulate test day as fully as possible. So that includes the timing and pacing as well as the endurance. Timing you can practice with individual timed sections to work on how you allocate your time over the course of the exam. But then you have the endurance factor as well, getting fatigued. You don't want your performance to drop on section 4 just because it is section 4. And so you build up your endurance, you build up your stamina by taking full 4-section exam sittings. That's 2 35-minute sections back to back. You take a 10-minute break. You then do 2 more 35-minute sections, and that's the test. So the good news is that you can easily simulate this now in LSAC's Law Hub platform. When they removed the logic games section and replaced it with a second scored logical reasoning section after the June 2024 LSAT, they also renumbered all of the practice tests from the old format into the new format. The new format exams are numbered 101 to 159. And so they are already giving you 4-section exams, even though on the new LSAT, only 3 sections of those are scored. So you already have the unscored 4th section mixed in there. And so I would recommend doing the 4-section exams in Law Hub to fully simulate the test. I see Ecstatic is asking, I'm taking the exam in April because I finally received accommodations. Will it be too late? Depends on the school. Some schools will take the results of the April LSAT, some won't. It's going to vary school by school depending on their particulars. In this cycle, law schools are taking longer and longer to get back to applicants because there are so many people applying this year. So they want to see who else is going to come along. They know more folks are coming along with higher scores. And so they have no incentive to care about when you apply. They only have incentive to care about the score that you apply with. And so some schools will take April LSAT results, but check with the school particularly. And if you are getting accommodations for the April test, and presumably you'll get a higher score with the accommodations than without, it's certainly worth the wait. But make sure the schools that you're looking at will take those results. I see Angie's asking, should I use books for my prep or a study program? So I've said this before, I'll say it again. There are some quality issues and format issues with the LSAT books these days. A lot of the books on Amazon now have fake reviews and are ChatGPT generated. So they're really just frankly garbage books. And they're also, even if they're valid books, they're out of date because the LSAT has undergone so many format changes in recent years. I just saw one book. I was checking into this last night, talking with an LSAT friend of mine, and we were noting how there was an AI book that was on Amazon, It was published in January 2026, yet it had entire chapters about logic games, even though logic games have not been on the LSAT for over a year and a half. And the reason is, although this book was published recently, it was AI generated. AI, because it was trained on material that references logic games, the AI thinks logic games are on the LSAT, even though they haven't been on the LSAT for a long time. And so that was one of the tells, aside from all the M dashes in the book. And so I recommend staying away from the books. You want to use online courses that are more up to date for the new format. I mean, after they removed logic games, we quickly purged our platform of all logic games materials. We added a lot more on logical reasoning. We're also adding more on the argumentative writing because LSAC will probably score the writing sample in the next year or two. We also updated to reflect the fact that you may or may not get a dual or comparative reading comprehension passage on the LSAT. It's no longer guaranteed, as we saw for folks taking the LSAT in January. So I will recommend getting some personal coaching for the LSAT or taking an online course, online live classes where you can get more personalized feedback and you're going to know at least the materials are up to date. And if you want to talk through your situation or get a sense of what LSAT tutoring is even like, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this. You can book that free lesson with me at unpluggedprep.com/start. The link to book that free tutoring with me is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and Instagram as well. Happy to meet with any of you watching this now or later and talk through what your personal coaching plan could look like. I see a question here asking, if I have a practice test score of 172, am I too late to reach my goal in April? I mean, I guess the question is, what is your ultimate goal for the test in April? If your practice tests currently are 172, could you get to a 175 by April? Maybe. Keep in mind, though, that students often drop a couple of points from their practice test to the actual official LSAT, and so you want to have a buffer. A practice test result is not the same as an official result because you have nerves and anxiety, you have potential tech issues or proctor issues, and so you want to have a buffer built into place. If you really want a 172 on test day, you ideally want to be at a 175 or higher on your practice tests going in so that you have that buffer and you have that security. I see Gabe is asking what was my score for the LSAT. So I personally started off at a 152. I ended up at a 175 though. Took me an entire year to get there though, and at least half of that was a complete waste of time. If I had done it properly, I could have knocked it out in just a couple of months because the LSAT is ultimately a test of pattern recognition. If you can spot the tricks and traps, you can avoid them. It all comes down to understanding how the test makers think and seeing it from their perspective. And once you do that, everything changes. And so make sure that when you're studying, you're not just looking to understand the question in front of you, you're looking to extract the key takeaways from all the questions you do so that you can apply those insights to other questions of that type in the future. And that could be of the same question type, or it could also be of a similar method of reasoning. And so we use a framework for the review called the Socratic review method. It's the cornerstone of our courses and of our coaching programs. And so make sure that you're documenting your review in a mistake journal or an error log. Could be a physical notebook, could be a Google Doc, could be a Google Sheet. Doesn't really matter as long as you are systematically looking at what you're getting wrong and why, step-by-step approach, making sure that you're constantly increasing the efficiency with which you approach the questions. And if you're not sure whether you're doing it right, if you want some personal feedback, we could talk through it more. You can book the free tutoring with me through the link in my bio. Happy to meet with you and talk through what your studying could look like, how we could help you level it up. I see user 8338 is saying that I watched a YouTube video of you last night on sufficient questions and it worked. Thanks. Awesome. Glad you're finding it helpful. And so yeah, folks, if you're not yet ready to book the free tutoring with me, that's okay, of course. I am offering, I have a YouTube channel linked in the bio as well, where I have literally thousands of videos on everything LSAT and law school admissions, covering every section, every question type, totally free. And so if you wanted to start off with that before upgrading to more personal support, that could be a good place to start. I see Pluto's asking, I have ADHD. It's too boring to study. Yeah, I get that. I mean, the LSAT can be boring, especially at first, but it's the sort of thing where you kind of got to fake it till you make it, right? So if you can feign interest, if you can pretend like what they're talking about is the most fascinating thing in the world, over time, you eventually start to feel that way, hopefully, is the idea, right? So, I mean, some of the topics can actually be kind of interesting. I mean, if you like to listen to podcasts, if you like to read The Atlantic, or maybe if you can start reading Scientific American or The Economist, you can find some entry point into the kinds of topics that the LSAT covers. If you want to get better at trivia night at the bar, for example, then maybe that's a way that you could start to develop some degree of interest in what they're talking about. And you can also caricature, you can exaggerate the different topics, the different viewpoints being presented. And over time, maybe you'll start to actually feel that way. I hope. One fun thing I found useful is to just exaggerate the viewpoints being presented in different reading comp passages, for example. That's a way to kind of dumb it down, simplify it, maybe make it more engaging. So try it out. If you want to go over a question with me, I do that in that free tutoring lesson so we could talk through it a little bit. I see Sneck is asking, Steve, are you hiring new tutors? I got a 177. Yeah, so we are actually. If you wanted to reach out to talk through that, you can definitely shoot me a DM or an email, DM through TikTok or Instagram, or email me help@lsatunplugged.com. Just send a copy of your resume and your official LSAT score report. We don't have hiring links on the side for this because we usually hire internally from former students, but every now and then, if we have an opening or have sufficient demand, I'll occasionally post on social about it. But yeah, feel free to reach out. I see Alan's asking, do law schools take into account the school you went to? For example, I have average stats, but went to a really good school. I mean, they'll see where you went to undergrad, but unfortunately for you in this case, I mean, they don't really factor in where you went to undergrad because they're not evaluated based on that metric. Law schools are primarily concerned with your undergraduate GPA and your LSAT score because that's what they have to report to the American Bar Association, which in turn is where US News pulls their data from for inclusion in the law school rankings. But prestige of undergrad, unfortunately, not a factor in the calculations or in the formulas when they're determining chances, essentially. So if your GPA is average or below median, you're going to want to balance it out with having a relatively higher LSAT score to compensate. But the good news is that law schools weigh your LSAT score more heavily than your undergraduate GPA. And so you still have plenty of room to move the needle and improve your odds of admission and strengthen your application. Your GPA probably is what it is at this point, but LSAT, you can still move the needle significantly. The LSAT's offered 8 times a year. Coming up, we've got April and June and August and beyond. So there's plenty of chances. It's offered every month or two. So there's plenty of opportunities to retake if you need to. I see Ronnie's asking, is a 3.7 undergraduate GPA good? Well, good is relative, right? So for a top 14 law school where their undergraduate GPA medians are roughly a 3.9, a 3.7 would be below the median, so it would not be good. It's above median for some lower ranked schools, though. So it all depends on where you want to go. If you want to go to a school ranked 50 or 100, 3.7 might be fine. If you want to go to a top 14 law school, you're going to want to balance out a relatively lower GPA with a relatively higher LSAT score. I see Jam is asking, what study materials do you recommend? Well, a must-have would be the actual official LSAT practice tests. You get 4 of them for free on LSAC's Law Hub platform. And then with your Law Hub Advantage subscription, you get all the others, 55 additional exams for $120 per year. Well worth the investment. If you can demonstrate low income, you can get a fee waiver and get them for free. We also offer free LSAT tutoring at LSAT Unplugged. You can book the free lesson with me, unpluggedprep.com/start. We offer more comprehensive coaching programs with private one-on-one coaching, small group coaching, on-demand courses, custom study plans. We personalize every program for the individual student. If you want to book a call with me to talk through the options, the link's in my bio. I'm happy to talk through what that could look like for you. I see Alan's asking, thoughts on predatory law schools? I want to move back home and these schools are not ranked high. I mean, if a school's predatory by definition, it's probably not a good place to go. Predatory law schools would be schools that are low ranked, meaning they have poor outcomes, they have low bar passage rates, pretty subpar employment outcomes, and they charge a lot in tuition. So the return on your investment to go to one of those schools is not very good if you're paying a significant amount of money. I suppose an exception to that would be if you can go for free, if you can not only go for free but get a living stipend, meaning that you're getting paid to go there, then I suppose that in that limited circumstance, it might not be a terrible way to go. But you got to go in with your eyes open, knowing what you're getting into. So do your research before you commit, ideally before you even apply, so that you're not wasting your time and money. If you were to look up any given law school, you just search the law school's name and the number 509, you'll be able to see their American Bar Association 509 reports, which will show you their LSAT median, their GPA median, percentage of students getting scholarships, percentage of students who keep those scholarships, as well as the employment outcomes and bar passage rates. So you can get a sense of whether the school, a given school, is a decent return on investment or not. But regardless of where you want to go, whether you want to go to a top 14 law school or you want to go to a relatively lower ranked law school, having better numbers will always get you better outcomes. It'll get you into better schools. It'll get you more scholarship money. And so if you want to go to a lower ranked school, applying with a top LSAT and top GPA can get you the full ride. If you want to go to a top 14 law school, getting the top numbers is virtually required just to get in. Now, if you have a 3.9 GPA, that's fantastic. I'm talking to user 8338 here. If you have a 3.9 GPA, that's going to be at or above the medians of most law schools, if not all law schools. And then the LSAT you need depends on the law school you want to go to. For a top 14, you'd want to have ideally a 175 to be above their LSAT medians. For a lower ranked school, a non-T14, you may not need to have a 175, of course, but the higher your LSAT is, the better the outcomes you're going to have when it comes to admissions. So in a way, goal scores are kind of silly in my view, because why wouldn't you want to aim for a 180 regardless of the school that you're targeting, right? We always want you to aim for the highest possible score, the best possible outcome. And giving yourself more time for your LSAT prep is going to be a better path to get there, right? And so you can knock it out. Technically, you can prepare for the LSAT in 2 or 3 months, but ideally you want to give yourself 5 or 6 months to achieve your fullest potential. And so if you're just starting your LSAT prep now, I probably wouldn't want you to rush it for April. I would ideally want you to give yourself till June or give yourself till August to give yourself more time to achieve your fullest potential. And if you're studying for the LSAT while working full-time and want to have some balance, I'm talking to in BandMap here, you want to carve out ideally maybe 2 hours a day on weekdays, a bit more on weekends, maybe an hour before work or an hour during lunch or an hour after work in the evenings, and then maybe 4 hours on the weekends, just to give yourself as much time as possible while still maintaining quality of life, being able to sleep, diet, exercise, and relaxation, taking care of yourself, full picture to have the best possible score while not burning out. And one thing that we do for our students is we help you craft a personal study plan to give yourself sufficient time to achieve your goal score on your time frame without letting anything fall by the wayside. I see Empress Nadia is asking, I live in Texas. They just removed ABA requirements for law schools in the state. Should I attempt to go to law school here in Texas because I want options to practice in Illinois, DC, New York, and New Jersey as well? Okay, so if you want to practice in multiple states and you want to be able to get admitted to the bar in multiple states, you still want to go to an American Bar Association approved law school. The problem with going to a non-ABA school is that you will typically be prevented from ever practicing outside of that state. And so it's unnecessarily limiting. You don't want to constrain your options. And you can't say with 100% certainty that you're never going to want to move. You might want to relocate because of family obligations, a significant other, get a job opportunity, for example. If you can't practice outside your state, you're basically stuck there. And never say never, right? Things could always change. And so if you want to be admitted to the bar in multiple states, you want to go to law school that will allow you to get admitted to the bar in multiple, and that's going to be ABA approved. You want to ideally be admitted to take the uniform bar exam and have multiple state options. And a state will typically prepare you for that state's bar, if not the UBE. But you also want to consider, can you practice in New York or California or elsewhere and so on. And so this change that happened with Texas and Florida recently is, of course, new only in the past few months, and it's still not clear what law schools will open that will be available to you and what are going to be their outcomes. You don't want to be the guinea pig trying out something new, making a six-figure bet on something without a proven track record. So I would still go to the American Bar Association approved schools. I see outside with Vern is asking, I just took my first baseline practice test yesterday. Where do I start? So the first thing I'll say is you take a cold diagnostic just to get a sense of where you stand. Don't take it as being indicative of your potential. All it's going to tell you is that you have not yet studied for the LSAT yet, but of course, you can conquer it if you give it the necessary time. Use it simply as a benchmark from which to measure your later future progress. And then you look at, okay, well, what's your current score? What's that baseline reveal? Was it actually taken under strict timed test day conditions, 4 sections in one sitting, with only a 10-minute break between sections 2 and 3? If it was strictly timed, then you can reasonably trust the result of that exam. And then you say to yourself, okay, well, what's my goal score? What's the gap between them? So if your practice test was, say, a 140 and you want a 170, you want to improve 30 points over what period of time? Hopefully you're not aiming for only April. You want to give yourself a bit more time if you want a 30-point increase. If you were studying for the LSAT full-time, maybe April's doable, but giving yourself a bit more time till June, for example, will probably get you a better result. Then you say to yourself, okay, well, how much time can I put in per day, per week, per month? Am I going to study alone with only textbooks or practice tests, or do I want to get some support, like private coaching or a course or small group classes, for example? And if you want to talk through those options, we offer all of the above at LSAT Unplugged. And if you want to craft a personal study plan for yourself and get a personal coaching program, you can book a free LSAT tutoring lesson with me at unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below the video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and Instagram as well. And that's an open offer, by the way, for everybody watching this. An hour or later, I'm happy to help. I see Ranya's asking about the LSAT test dates. And so currently published on LSAC's site, you could see the upcoming LSAT test dates in April and June, for example. They have not yet published the test dates for beyond June, but historically they've offered the LSAT 8 times a year. And last year they offered it in August, September, October, and November in 4 consecutive months. My guess is they're probably trying to standardize the test dates, and they'll do the same thing this year. We'll see what they do. But either way, you'll have multiple chances to take it in the second half of 2026, and they'll probably release those dates in the next month or two. Once they do, of course, I'll post about it on my socials, and I'll make a video about it as well and update everybody on that so you can plan your schedule accordingly. Just scanning through for more questions here. Thanks for coming. Thanks for leaving all of them here. I see Escobedo Bianca's asking, any thoughts about Thomas Jefferson Law School? They lost their ABA accreditation, but are offering a pretty good scholarship. Well, I guess the first question is, why did they lose their ABA accreditation? To me, that's a big red flag. Did they have bad bar passage rates? Did they have bad employment outcomes? If so, you want to ask, is this school well equipped to help you pass the bar and help you get a job upon graduating? They probably don't have a very good reputation if they lost their accreditation. And so you're putting a decent amount of money into something that may not have good prestige associated with it. So you're basically saying they're discounting it a lot. This thing is pretty cheap, and it has pretty bad reputation. If it's cheap and has a bad reputation, is it still a good deal? Not necessarily. You might want to go to a better ranked school, even if you have to pay a little bit more. Because the value of a low quality degree is not that high, and you're carrying that low quality degree with you for the rest of your career. When you say Thomas Jefferson, will you get the same respect as you would for having gone to a better law school? What will your employment opportunities be with a JD from Thomas Jefferson? What states will you be able to practice in with a degree from that school? And what makes you think that your outcomes from going there will be better than going to a more prestigious or better ranked school that does have ABA accreditation? What do you want to do with your degree? These are all questions that I would want you to do some serious research on and thinking about before you decide to go there. And for most folks, I would recommend, for virtually everybody, I would recommend going to an ABA approved law school because they're doing quality control. They're making sure the school has good bar passage rates, good employment outcomes, and in many states, you need to go to an ABA approved law school in order to be able to practice and sit for the bar. Sometimes things vary by state, of course. Talk to a practicing attorney, see what they have to say about any of this before moving forward. I see Josh is asking, what year in college should I start seriously studying for the LSAT? Well, your LSAT score is good for 5 years. So if you wanted to go straight from undergrad into law school, you could hypothetically take the LSAT as a freshman and then apply as a senior, and your score is still valid. But I don't recommend doing that for most people because as a freshman in college, are you even sure that you want to do law school? You might change your mind a couple of times between freshman year and senior year, and that time might be better spent maintaining a good undergraduate GPA and enjoying school, exploring your career options. The LSAT's not going anywhere. Law school's not going anywhere. You could then revisit it as a sophomore or a junior. You could hypothetically study for the LSAT in your spring of your sophomore year, over the summer as well. Take it in fall of your junior year. Then you still have multiple retake opportunities before senior year when you might apply if you wanted to go straight. In other words, I'm saying there's no rush. For the best LSAT outcomes, you want to give yourself 5 to 6 months to study for the LSAT. So I'm not saying don't start early, but you want to start early up to a point. 1 year ahead, 2 years ahead might be earlier than you need to do it. I see Ranya's asking, if I wanted to start law school in fall 2027, what is the last LSAT I can take this year? You could take literally any LSAT this year and apply to start law school in fall 2027. So you could take it in November of this year, whatever the last LSAT is of the year, and then you could still apply as soon as the score comes back. Ideally, you apply relatively earlier in the cycle, though. So I think for the best outcomes, you would take the LSAT in June or August of this year, apply as soon as applications open in September, then you're starting law school the following year. The benefit of planning ahead is that it's easier to get in, and there's more scholarship money available as well. So applying earlier is better when you can. But if you needed more time to get a higher score, if you had to retake, that would be okay. Taking it in October or November or December, or even January of next year would still be totally fine. It wouldn't be too late. I see Shanta's asking, what does the LSAT consist of? So you've got 2 scored logical reasoning sections, 1 scored reading comprehension section, and then 1 unscored extra section of either logical reasoning or reading comprehension. Each section is 35 minutes. In reading comp, you have either 4 single long passages or 3 single long passages and then 2 short or dual comparative passages. In logical reasoning, you have short arguments and fact sets on a variety of different topics and different question types. You have strengthen, weaken, flaw, sufficient assumption, necessary assumption, resolve, parallel, and so on. The most common types of logical reasoning questions are necessary assumption, inference, and flaw, so I'd start there. You also have an unscored writing sample, which is much less important because it is unscored, so I'd focus on the scored portions of the LSAT first. If you're brand new to the LSAT, you could take a practice test just to see where you're at, and then if you are looking to improve your score above that practice test, then you can, of course, reach out to me personally. I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now or later. The link to book that free tutoring with me is unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below this video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and Instagram as well. That's an open offer for everybody watching this now or later. And if you find these lives helpful, I do these every single weekday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you're watching this. If you find these helpful, please spread the word, share this to your socials. The only way this grows is through word of mouth. I don't do any advertising for these lives, and the algo doesn't really boost them because they can't run ads during them. So I do appreciate your support in spreading the word. I see a couple folks are asking, where can I take the practice? I see Shanta's asking and Kat's asking. You can take a free practice test on LSAC's Law Hub platform. It's lsac.org. You get 4 practice tests for free, and you can take the practice test there. And I see Julian is asking about LSAT score cancellations. And so when you cancel your LSAT score, if you don't like the number that you see in front of you, law schools just see a cancellation. They just see the word cancel. Like, they don't see the actual number associated. Only you get to see your score before deciding whether to cancel if you pay for LSAC's score preview. Score preview does not mean you see your score before you otherwise would. It just means that you get to see your score before deciding whether to cancel it. And in my view, that's kind of a money grab on LSAC's part, because law schools only take the highest score into consideration anyway. And so a low score versus a cancel, one is not better than the other. They both just are discounted in favor of whatever your highest score on record is. And so if your score is lower than you would have wanted it to be, you should probably just retake the LSAT to get a higher score and boost your odds. Simple as that. And for that reason, I actually recommend that everybody retake the LSAT at least once, because if you do better, great, you've now got a higher score. If you do worse, no big deal. The higher score still counts. And so in other words, law schools do not penalize multiple LSAT takes. And there are not too many limits on retaking the LSAT either. You can take it 5 times in 5 years, 7 times for life. And if you get a 180, you can't take it again. That's it. But of course, if you got a 180, you wouldn't need to take it again, right? And so retaking it 2, 3, 4 times, 5 times, no big deal. Law schools have no incentive to care about multiple takes because they're not evaluated based on that metric. Doesn't matter. The highest score, though, they care about that because that's what they report to American Bar Association for U.S. News. I see Ronnie's asking about tutoring online versus tutoring in person. I mean, tutoring in person is a lot less popular than it used to be. I used to do a lot of tutoring in person, but I discontinued that once the pandemic hit about 6 years ago now. Can't believe it's been that long. But once the pandemic hit, we just moved everything online. We were already doing some online tutoring back then, but we moved entirely online. And we haven't really looked back just because it's so much more convenient. You don't have to commute at all. You can work with the best tutor for you, regardless of location or geography. We have students and tutors all over the world, and we're able to easily accommodate time zone differences and such like that. And that way you're not wasting time commuting. You always have your materials ready to go. And you can work with whichever tutor best fits your schedule, but also your personality, learning style, considering your weak areas and such. And if you want to try it out, I mean, I offer free LSAT tutoring for everybody. It's online, and we work together via Zoom video. So you can be on camera, you can speak, you're not typing in some webinar chat box or anything like that. And so if you want to book the free tutoring with me and try it out, no obligation, of course, just you book the link through in my bio. It's unpluggedprep.com/start. I'm happy to meet with you personally and talk through what your action plan could look like. Thanks for all the great questions, folks. I see Epic Gamer saying, I got a 157 diagnostic. Can I get a 175 with practice? Yeah, I don't see why not. I mean, 18 points, very doable. Of course, 175 is top 1%, so I'm not going to say it's easy. By definition, few people get that kind of score, but ultimately, your improvement on the LSAT is going to be a function of the amount that you study combined with the way in which you study. So it comes down to, what are you missing? What are the gaps? What are your weak areas? And then can we craft an action plan to correct those and improve them? And so it could be that you need to drill a particular question type or a particular method of reasoning. It could be that you need to work more on full-length practice tests. Could be a question of pacing or time management. I'm just speculating here. We can dig into the details when we meet, but those are some thoughts in terms of what you might want to do differently. And so if you haven't studied at all yet, of course, there's going to be a lot of low-hanging fruit. And so we look at your analytics, we look at your weak areas, we look at your gaps in your foundation, perhaps. And so if there's a certain question type, a certain method of reasoning, we start with the fundamentals. And so aside from the tutoring, you also get access to our online platform with in-depth lessons covering every section, every question type, every method of reasoning. We give you an LSAT study roadmap covering the entire syllabus start to finish. And so we link you to particular lessons that you might work on at any given point in time, and your tutor will recommend for you particular lessons and areas to focus on based on your weak areas and what you cover in the tutoring lessons. See a question here asking, I have a chart I made when I drill. Can you look at that, or do I start from scratch? I mean, I'll definitely want to look at your analytics if you have charts or data that you've put together, of course. You've done the work to put it together. I'm definitely happy to give it a look and give you my take on it. Yeah, so feel free to send it over before we meet. I see Nishak is asking, any advice for someone who has great practice test results, but struggles during the real exam? So yeah, this comes down to the gap between practice tests and actual test day performance. Students often drop at least a couple of points from their practice to the actual. And so that's why you want to have a buffer in place. You want to be scoring above your goal score going into the exam. So that way, if you have a bad proctor, you have tech issues, you have nerves, you have anxiety, you're still safely scoring at your goal score. And then you also want to make sure that you're properly simulating test day conditions with timing and pacing and endurance. You don't want to be giving yourself extra time on your practice tests if you don't have that extra time during the actual official exam, right? So whatever your actual test day format's going to be, you want to simulate that and constrain yourself with that down to the finest details so that your practice test scores are not artificially inflated as a result. And so you're saying you drop almost 10, 15 points from your practice tests. So that might just be partial. We got to raise your baseline. And so I'd be curious to see, what are your weak areas? Are there certain trends in what you're getting wrong and why? Can we deepen your review to drill down to the root cause of what you're getting wrong and why, so that you can avoid making the same mistakes again? And the thing is that when you're studying on your own, you don't know what you don't know, right? And so getting some guidance from someone who's been there, been through that process, gotten that top score themselves, experienced their own significant score increase, they're going to be able to help you course correct because you can't see your own blind spots, right? And so that's why we do the tutoring, to help you drill down to the root cause of your mistakes so that you can correct them now. You make the mistakes now, you correct them now, so you don't make them on test day itself when it matters. I see Irene's asking, can you do a rundown for necessary assumption versus sufficient assumption? So these are two different types of logical reasoning questions. Necessary assumption is far more common, so I'll start there. But you want to make sure that you're distinguishing the two question types. They both have assumption in the name, but they're asking for very different things. Necessary assumption questions are a very specific kind of must-be-true question because they're asking for what is required in order for the argument to work. And so you determine that it is in fact a necessary assumption based on a keyword or phrase in the question stem. Necessary assumption questions contain words and phrases like depends upon, requires, and assumes, which are all synonymous with necessity. In contrast, sufficient assumption questions contain words and phrases synonymous with sufficiency, like allows, enables, properly inferred if assumed, and logically follows if assumed. Now, for sufficient assumption, they are opening the door to new information, asking you which one of the following, if true, would guarantee the conclusion given the evidence, leaving no ambiguity at all. So in other words, it doesn't matter how strong it is, as long as it gets the job done. And again, the three most common question types on logical reasoning are necessary assumption, inference, and flaw. So you want to start with those types first before getting into the less common types of logical reasoning questions. In other words, you don't want to focus a lot on parallels just because they're hard and you hate them if you have not yet mastered the more common types of logical reasoning questions. The more common types are going to be higher yield, meaning you'll get more return on time invested there versus the less common types. I see Jonathan's asking, is it true the first 10 questions in logical reasoning are the easiest? Yes, they are. on average. So logical reasoning, the questions get more difficult on average as the section goes on. And so for that reason, one of my pacing recommendations is that you try to solve the first 10 questions in LR in roughly 10 minutes. You build up a time bank that you can then apply to the tougher questions later in the section that truly need it. So you don't want to get bogged down on easier questions and then not have enough time for the harder questions where you would need to devote more than the average allotted amount of time. So first 10 questions in 10 minutes, then roughly maybe 2 minutes or more for a really hard question. For the hardest ones, you note what they're going to be, you flag them, you skip them, you come back later so that you don't get bogged down or stuck. In reading comprehension, it's a little bit different because the questions are grouped by passage. And so for that reason, I don't recommend doing them in that order, but instead do the questions based on their type. So in reading comp, you do the general global questions first, like main idea, primary purpose, passage organization, title, tone, author's opinion. You knock those out first. Those are your warm-up questions, so to speak. Then you move on to the detail questions, and you save the more inferential questions that require a bit more reading between the lines. You save those for last. In other words, you got to warm up with the orientation, like the author's opinion. And if you don't know the author's opinion, then you're kind of lost in general, right? So you got to know what is the main idea before getting into the weeds. And I see a question here asking, any tips to reach 150s on test day? Well, I mean, that's fundamentals, right? So you can reach the 150s by focusing on those higher yield question types, the more common types of logical reasoning questions, the global big picture questions in reading comp. And then after you've mastered those, then and only then do you get into the detail questions or the harder questions. But if you're struggling to reach the 150s, there is still foundational work to be done. And I would not yet take the official LSAT yet, in part because I would want you to score above a 160 for the best law school admissions outcomes. In other words, I don't think that you should aim just to reach 150s. I think you should aim to reach at least 160s to get into better schools, to get more scholarship money. Because if you only have an LSAT in the 150s, you're not going to get into the better schools, and the lower ranked schools won't give you much of any scholarship money. So I don't mean to sound harsh here. I'm just being real about what it takes to get into law schools that are worth going to with offers that are worth accepting. So hopefully you have some time before your LSAT. I wouldn't take it this week. I would take it maybe more 2 to 4 months from now and set your sights higher. But you have plenty of time if you're willing to give yourself another 2 to 4 months to reach your highest possible score. And if you want my help getting into the 160s and beyond, for those just joining, I'm offering free LSAT tutoring for everybody watching this now or later. The link to book that free tutoring lesson with me, private one-on-one over Zoom video, it's unpluggedprep.com/start. The link is below this video on YouTube, pinned in the chat on YouTube, in my bio on TikTok and Instagram. Open offer for everybody watching this now or later. And if you find these lives helpful, I do them every single weekday, same time, same place, 2 p.m. Eastern, 1 Central, 11 Pacific, here on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, wherever you're watching this. I'll be back tomorrow, same time, same place. In the meantime, I wish you all the best and take care. Thanks for joining.